Hey, and good morning to welcome to Talking to Artists, and welcome to episode 60 that we're at today. And we're going to be talking to Floyd Elzinga. So, for those of you who don't know, you've probably seen his work around. Floyd is very well known for his iconic pine cones. He's got a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Halifax. And so really looking forward to chatting with him. And so with no further ado, actually I'm going to bring him on in a second because I just want to talk to you about, I am participating in a one-day show in Stouffville this Saturday. So it's 11 till 5. There's only 30 artists. It's outdoors, so it's super safe. And so I hope to see you up there. It's in Memorial Park in Stouffville. So I'm going to right now bring on Floyd as I look forward to chatting. And he should be on for us in a second. Hey, how are you?
Good. And yourself?
Good. Looks like you're in a pretty amazing space today.
Yeah, if a parking lot is a nice space.
Oh, well, from here it looks like you're in a beautiful country pasture.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I think we lost you for a second there, but I think we're probably hopefully going to be good.
Okay. Am I connecting okay?
Yeah, it's kind of going in and out, which I don't know if sometimes it does. So,
Oh,
but
yeah. So I wasn't sure about the Wi-Fi at my place, and it like the kids always complain about it. So I was like, last minute, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go find as many bars as I can, and I literally drive not even like 100 meters down the street, and it's like 4 bars, whereas at our house, like maybe one. So
yeah. Well, I have that issue here too because my Wi-Fi it's erratic at the cottage, and so I find it was spinning between my Wi-Fi and my data. So I try and just use data,
nice.
but hopefully we're kind of losing you a bit.
That's not good.
You might have to pick up your chair and walk.
Yeah. I've got a really good signal here, so I don't know what's going on.
Well, it might be me too. So anyway, let's kind of jump right in because I'm super excited to talk to you because I really love your work and love kind of the iconic pine cones. But I'm curious, watching the pictures of you in your studio and these huge pieces of metal and how you started and what inspired you to work in metal.
That's kind of a funny question because I didn't choose to work in metal. I did pretty much every university. I majored actually in textiles, and
Oh, really?
yeah, and I did actually a lot of stone
So
carving.
So I don't, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a sec because I don't know if it's you or me. I can't really hear you. Can somebody who's on the line tell me if it looks like it's my connection or Floyd's connection? Because if it's me, I can also move because I can't. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, and you're coming in
Okay.
clear, and I see lots of people
Oh,
are joining. You got a great crowd here.
yeah, I find more people even watch later, so that's kind of that's always cool. Oh,
That's
there's my
awesome.
sister. So Helen, tell me, can you hear
She's
Floyd? Can you hear me? He's pausing a lot. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting to. Anyway, so
okay.
why don't we
Well,
try and see?
all right. Well, otherwise I can connect you in my vehicle, drive back up to my place, and go up into my like we've got a place, and then like we do have Wi-Fi. It's just like it uploads at 1 megabit per second, and it's pretty slow. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I usually find data works better, but well, why don't we try? Because what you were just saying, I heard it all.
Okay. All right. So you were asking me about metal and or steel, and I learned all of my metalworking in jewelry at Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Halifax, and the
Wow.
yeah, the principles are well, not exactly the same. The price of the materials is significantly lower when you are looking at steel versus gold or silver or even copper. but the principles are the same. It's malleable, it's flexible. You can fasten it, you can weld it, you can bend it, and I took a lot of those principles from jewelry and applied them to steel and stainless steel, and now I've started working with bronze.
It's so interesting because I just don't, when I see stainless steel and I see your pieces, I just don't think malleable. I think, I think that they must be pounded into shape or something, but
Stainless steel is probably the least malleable of the metals, and um, but they have like a kind of a plastic state. I know, and it's counterintuitive because you think of stainless or steel or metals as being this really rigid material, and they have a range depending on whether what the temper of the material is. But having worked with stone, steel is so forgiving. It's just like it's kind of almost magical that you can bend it and shape it and cut and then reattach, and you do all of these things without anyone being the wiser later on. But if you're carving stone and you're working away and all of a sudden a chunk falls off, the piece is gone, and it's off. Like you're gonna, if you're gonna put it back on, it's gonna be glued. It's gonna be, it's
yeah.
sub, yeah. It's so it's and that's what I love about metal. It's not a reductive process. It's like it's additive and reductive and all of these at the same time. And if you're good, you're able to have no one even know how it was made and hide all of the fabrication points.
I have to say, for me, there's something a little bit magical about working in steel. Like it just, I have to say, I admit I'm addicted to Forged in Fire, and it amazes me they can take like a lawnmower spring and then create these beautiful, you know, um, beautiful work of art out of it. I think it's kind of such an interesting thing. And I guess with the fire, it just seems like such a romantic and exciting medium to work in.
That yeah, it's yeah. There's a kind of a time, well, maybe not timeless, but definitely it's a primal kind of like you're working with fire and electricity. So if you're scared of fire or electricity, welding is not your medium.
And so, are you like when you started off? Then did you start small and decide to go large, or have you always kind of? Because I think all the stuff I've seen of yours has been the giant pine cones, which are just so stunning.
Yeah, well, I started off with giant ideas. Like after graduating from university, I literally thought I'm going to make monumental sculptures that are going to change the world. And people were like, "Yeah, that's really nice, Floyd, but could you make me an end table and a place to put my CDs?" So I I I kind of looked at it and took it from the other side and started like making sort of things that people were interested in. But I still had a goal. Like I made like early on, I made hundreds, probably thousands of flowers. It's kind of like the metal workers, like low end. But my goal or my idea at the time was that someday all of these flowers would come back, and I had a dream of a giant field full of uh, corn that was lit up. And talking with a friend, in electricity, he said the wires that you would need and the transport. It's like that's not possible. This like it's out to lunch. So I started looking at just simple pieces and one selling one flower at a time with the idea of like actually I'm creating like an entire field of
Field,
field. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're just not all in the same place.
Not yet. Like, so that was the early, well, or maybe they will never be. But my dream was that, oh, at some point, I'll just everyone to bring back the 5 flowers they have. We'll put them in a field. We'll take a photograph, and they take them back home. And it's like this kind of, it's like large scale, small scale, or crowdsourcing. Like everyone
Yeah,
has kind of like they've bought into this idea. Even if they didn't know, they just bought one flower or three flowers, but there's probably thousands out there now, and just even just the idea of imagining them in a giant field would, I don't know, I think it would be magical.
It would be so cool. It would be like Floyd Fest. You know, everybody brings their thing and has a glass of wine and celebrates being part of this happening.
Yeah, I don't
And so
know. I don't know if it'll happen, but that's the fun
so,
thing about
and
having.
Sorry, do you still do those flowers?
I do, certainly a lot less. Like I have some at my studio, but like my career's kind of evolved, and I certainly don't market them or advertise them in any capacity. But they're kind of, well, they're where I started. I don't do the same type anymore, and I'm always, rethinking how even they could be. But there's so many metal flowers on the market. I'm kind of not interested in pursuing that any further.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that I think you certainly have created a pretty amazing niche for yourself, and I don't know if that was intentional or if that just sort of happened as it sometimes does, and you kind of fall into something that ends up being, pretty brand identifiable.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say, but intentions and best laid plans kind of always go sideways, and I guess what I found is choosing always just reevaluating what I'm doing and thinking, okay, what do I like doing, and what am I good at, and then fortunately, how can I how can I make money doing the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the things you love.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, I always think that it's good to have a plan, but it's not good to be so rigid to that plan that you don't see other opportunities as you're on that path.
That's true.
So I love the statement on your website that talks about rotten stumps and invasive species and the aggressive nature of seeds, which I kind of giggled a little bit because, I'm up at the cottage this year, of course, as everybody knows. And I've noticed that the pine trees have just a tremendous amount of pine cones on them, like more than I've ever seen before. And, you have to rake the grass like 3 times a day because they're all over the place. So I kind of thought, yeah, I totally identify with that aggressive nature of seeds versus just seeds being seeds and passive kind of.
Well, that's the funny thing. I just learned what passive aggressive means, and I switched that line in my statement to be passive aggressive, because they're not aggressive. They're just laying there. They're hanging from a tree, and then they're laying on the ground, or they kind of float gently over. But they like, if they had they do have a purpose. Their purpose is to create more, and literally that's what I love about the pine cone, is like, it's not just one seed. If you look in a pine cone, I was just walking around here, I'm like, look at that pine cone. Like, in this thing, when it opens up, there's going to be like over 100 little seeds. That could
Yeah.
be a hundred. That's like a
They're
forest.
beautifully packaged. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're beautifully packaged in a nice little container. I really noticed that too, because as they get hot, they start to open up a little bit more, and then you'll see the chipmunks eat them out, and you can really see that they serve so many purposes too, as being food as well as obviously seeds to grow.
Yeah.
And you've done, just to kind of get back to, so how come, what made you decide on the pine cone, or is that just what happened to kind of take off?
Yes. um, I I started with thistle seeds, because like thistles and dandelions, like, I made, so the flowers kind of evolved into making this like a 9-foot dandelion that
I saw that. That's so cool.
yeah, and all of the seeds were gone on this, like, because like, they're part of the aster family, and they all have this a similar sort of structure to the pine cone in the Fibonacci sequence, in how the seeds, well, actually, like in the center of a dandelion or any of those that family of flowers, there are hundreds of little flowers all arranged nicely in this geometric sequence, and each of those little flowers creates a seed, and each of those seeds then has this kind of like airlift technology on it that when the situation is right, they just kind of float away and literally invade your lawn or your neighbor's lawn if and that's where I kind of started with those seeds, or the seeds, that idea. But I love seeds because it's like it has all of the just all of life just wrapped up in this neat little parcel package, like time capsule almost. And yeah, so seeds in general are inspirational, but it started with like the worst the worst offenders, and kind of it transitioned over the years. And then when I hit a pine cone, the first one I made was literally made out of scrap steel that was left over from cutting out flowers. So I cut out flowers. There'd be these weird shapes, and I kind of stacked them all in a way that they look like if I think about it now, it didn't look anything like a pine cone. It looked like a hot mess. But
I'm sure it wasn't. It was an impressionistic pine cone.
Exactly. I was such a realist. Like it had, this is not good. But it literally, it spawned this kind of trajectory that I had no idea that it was going to, no idea where it was going to take me.
And it's cool too because it's such, especially the white pine being in Ontario, is such an iconic icon. Well, I guess an iconic version of Ontario. And then the maple leaf. I think it's really neat that your stuff is kind of at the border too, kind of like welcoming tourists and immigrants and stuff into the country with something that just is so beautiful and so iconic. Like that's such an honor to be part of that.
Yeah, that was a nice connection that a landscape architect ended up kind show despite his wishes. And his wife dragged him along, and he was not happy. But in that process, he met me, and I don't even remember this, but years later he brought me to his place and said, "This is what I want. I'm making this plaza for the border, and we're going to symbolically welcome people to Ontario with the white pine cone, and I know you can do it because like if I plant a white pine tree there, it will die. They hose this plaza down with salt so much that any pine tree would just not survive, or white pine tree would
well, plus they need shade. They need shade too. Like they don't really grow that well in super sun, which usually those plazas are in the middle of sun, right?
Yeah, and so he said a white pine cone will be the symbolic welcome to Ontario, and they were planning to sandblast the leaf into the stone. I said, let me make you a stainless steel version for that, and that will work well together. And they loved it. They were on board, and that's a nice international border sculpture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then you've also done, I think you're saying installations like in Vietnam with the forest of pine cones, and are those also traditionally Vietnamese pine cones, or are they Canadian pine cones that have been taking over a Vietnamese forest?
No, they're in a like a pine forest at it's beautiful art museum in a super fancy resort. And but yeah, pine trees are there. Pine trees grow all over the world, and the pine cones that I make are like the kind of like there's two styles that I make, and they're really loose. Like they're an adaptation. they're loosely based on a pine cone. They're not necessarily a specific variety. I do get into that and really like to get species specific, but my general pine cones are more generic and kind of just a like a nice proportion.
A representation, really. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so tell me about how you ended up getting a job like that or a commission like that. That sounds like a pretty cool opportunity.
It was getting an email and thinking, that's spam. And I always look at my emails, all of them. And then if there's a link, it's like, do I click on, don't click on the link. I learned that much.
You've been trained, I know.
But so I Googled it. I'm like, this is a legit place. What they have is a symposium that they've done for the year 2019 when I went there was the 5th. I keep getting a reminder to join Kate.
Oh, you have to just dismiss it, yeah.
Yes,
so I didn't actually hear that, so maybe you could go through that again because you got the email, you Googled it, looked like it was legit.
and it was so they run a symposium where they bring international artists. Well, they started with Vietnamese artists. It was to encourage the development of art in Vietnam, and they have a really vibrant arts culture there, and their tourism and culture was promoting this, and so they started to expand it beyond. Oh, where did you go? Yeah, are we still connecting?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
They started to expand it to include international artists, and when I was there in 2019, they had a Japanese artist, a Spanish artist, there were 3 Vietnamese artists, someone from Korea, and I feel like I'm forgetting someone. But in France, and we got to hang out in a shack in the just off-site from literally 100 meters from where the sculptures were gonna be installed, and build our sculptures. So all of us are there building our sculptures. But how they found me is like, I don't know. Maybe they used the internet. That's my guess. Oh, and
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, actually. So, and that's probably how it is. So a couple of years before that, the Canadian government bought a sculpture from Eno Gallery in Prince Edward County and donated it to the Vietnamese government. And it's I imagine that's helped push my sculptures up in, like I said, I don't know how the internet works, but I think because I asked them, I'm like, how did you find me? And they're like, we Googled you. And, I guess if you Google forest art and sculpture,
Well, and if they have a piece there already, then they may have also been a little bit familiar, right? So that's kind of a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was fun. I just love that picture. As you know, I use that to promote because it's just this concept of almost like coming across. They're almost like wild animals in a herd, sort of like just kind of being dropped in the forest like that. I just love that.
Well, and they literally wanted to have them hanging from the trees. I was like, I don't think that, it's not going to work. They're like, don't worry, we got engineers. We're going to make it work. And I made the smallest, thinnest one that I could, like a little 4-foot one out of fairly thin material, and they had their engineers look at it and they're like, yeah, this is not going to work. So
yeah, maybe they should have listened to the artist who's familiar with these.
Well, I said we could, and they probably still are like thinking about how they can hang them, but they have a 10-foot version there that like it weighs like a ton, a literal ton, and the like a sky hook they would need would have to be enormous, and it would kind of lose the magic if you can see the
Yeah.
wires. But
Yeah, and so I guess that when you did the installation, then at I guess now Brookfield Place, BC Place with all the glass, and it was for Earth Day, I think, right? Like that, they must obviously they have the structure then to be able to support something like that.
they have hung a car in the Calatrava in that atrium. Okay, and it's literally it's a structure well over designed for its capacity. It's arches that are cross networked to like a ridiculous amount of strength. And so they like I didn't do the engineering of that. They had engineers figure out how to do that, and they were fully confident in these pine cones hanging in the Brookfield Place. It's called now. It used to be called BCE or
BC, yeah. Well, I was just going to say for people who are listening but are not familiar with BC Place, it's a beautiful, almost looks like towering trees in metal and then a whole glass structure. Which, if you watch any science fiction show that's shot in Toronto, they almost use that as the headquarters, as Space Force headquarters.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space, and that was one of those things that just kind of happened. They said, "Hey, do you want to put some sculptures in here?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then I Googled, I looked at the space, and I'm like, "This is enormous. Like, I can't like something. It's going to have to be dramatic, or it's going to get lost." Like, it
Yeah.
literally was a street between these giant towers in on Bay Street, and they closed it in with glass, and then for my installation hung, it was like 27 pine cones in the air, and then there were 3 enormous ones sitting on the ground. And I it never concerned me, but I met several people there at the opening who were just terrified by it.
Well, that was going to land on them.
Well, that they were going to fall. They were like didn't have trust.
Got to trust those engineers. They know what they're doing.
Yes, yeah.
And so, how like all of your stuff is very kind of nature based, and it feels like there's a bit of a message of environmentalism in terms of looking at the seeds at a closer level and kind of seeing how they kind of react to nature. Are you is that a message that is part of what you do, or is that just sort of followed naturally?
Well, I grew up on a farm, and I don't think, like, having been raised in like on a farm, and realizing that our food and our life comes from the earth. I don't know that like that can ever leave you, that idea or the importance of it. And so I wouldn't say it's an intentional message that I'm trying to bring across. I just think it's in there because I'm inspired by nature. I'm inspired by things that I find in nature, and I don't know how to answer that. It's funny. I was just asked that for a show that I was at at the Earl's Court in Hamilton, and I didn't know. I was really kind of stumped. I should have an answer that says.
I think that, but I mean, sometimes too, you kind of go down this path. You're not always consciously aware of why you do things, even though that influences are kind of so embedded. But I think for me, the way I see your work is that because it's such a massive scale, it sort of stops you upright and it forces you to really look at, things like a dandelion thistle or a pine cone in a way that you probably haven't done before. Like we were talking before about, how beautiful it's designed, and you see them all over the place, but do you really pick them up and look at them until you see a giant Floyd Elzinga sculpture and you're like, okay, I can look at that now. I can see it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely, like, early on, it was like I probably had or wanted to have a more environmental message in my work, especially with the dandelion seeds and then the zipper. These were like, in my mind, they were part of a sculptural body of work that I was calling earth surgery, because I was like, I thought about agriculture, and agriculture, like, it doesn't have a, well, it has a sordid history with the environment, because it's, yeah, mass agriculture is one thing. If you're growing just enough for your family, that's a totally separate thing. So early on, I was really thinking about those things, and I'm sure they're still in my mind, but at this point, they're less. Well, they're still pressing, but they're I think they're foundational, as opposed to, one driving point in a piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so for these big pieces you do, like you obviously you must have a forge and a studio that must be pretty kind of intensive. And do you do this stuff yourself, or do you have a team, or how does that work? How do you actually go about your day at the studio and decide to work?
Well, when I first started, I was like, okay, I got to build a forge. And I built a forge. It was a hot day like today, and I had this coal that I had gotten from Stelco. I like went down and said, hey, can you? Didn't know what I was doing, and I
Hey,
worked.
can you give me a forge?
Yeah. No, I kind of just built it, and like I bought these books and figured out how to kind of piece one together. And it was hot, dirty work, and I was like, that's it. No more forge, no more forgery. I like the imagery of forgery, that idea, but I everything I do is cold forge. So I I don't have a like a hot thing oven that I put the metal in and then smash that. If that's the idea you have of me, you look at my arms. They're pretty wimpy. That's not it's not me. And I have a team of people that help me. Like, from the very beginning, I have always had someone helping me make my pieces, and metal's a good thing in that way, that it's not like I told you earlier, it has this ability that if you don't like the way it is, you can cut it and you can meld it. So I um, have, in order to make large sculptures, there's not really enough time or energy for me to be able to do that all myself. So there are two options that I go for, and one is getting industry that's out there to help me make things. Um, being a fabrication shop or a foundry, or someone, and using the skills that these places would have to be able to help me get to my dream sculpture. But often places like that are reluctant when they find out you're an artist. They have difficulty um, getting on board with your vision. So in a lot of cases, I find myself better off figuring out how to do these things myself, and then having them made in my studio. So right now I have two people working for me full time, and one person helping a couple days a week, and um, that then I can literally put together larger sculptures that would take me yeah, forever, or I would get sidetracked.
Well, I was just say too that I mean, obviously, it's still your dream, it's your vision, it's your design, but I would imagine too that it also frees up some of your time to think about other things you might want to do, like your fire cones and the wall art that I've seen sort of more recently in the last few years. That's you know, a different sort of point of view, and you can't do everything all at the same time, right?
No, and part of this process is running a business. So, you know, having people to do your bookkeeping, and to shout out to Carolyn, who does does that. And
Very important to outsource your bookkeeping.
well, early on when I did it, I found I would pay more fees and late penalties than actual taxes. So yes,
Plus,
yes,
I don't know about you, but it's just something I really hate doing. So if I'm going to delegate something, that seems like a nice, easy thing to delegate.
yes, yeah. Um, I didn't mind doing it, but I wasn't very good at it. So that's like back to earlier, is like, okay, are these things that I'm good at, or are these things that I like to do? And if they're not, then find someone else to do those things for you, because um, yeah, like there's no sense like I hate beating myself up to do things that I don't like to do. And there are lots of things that I like to do that I'm not good at. So yeah, it's finding people that can do things that you're not good at, and outsourcing, you become a better version of yourself in the process.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm actually struggling with this right now, especially being at the cottage. I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere, but you know, you get to a point too where you're kind of, you know, there's things that take up a lot of time that I don't like doing. I'm not particularly great at it, but to try and figure out what part of your business you can delegate and what part you can have help with, and how you can kind of maximize the time that you can spend in creating and thinking of different things and new things can be a challenge. Like even though if the intention is there, sometimes it's hard to figure out strategically how to do that.
Yeah, but like I found it's always good to, every couple of years when you start running into whatever space, time, all of these issues, then just reevaluate. Okay, hold on. All these are all of the things that are taking up all of my time. Which of them do I enjoy? Which of them do, you know, and just put them in the pros and cons columns. And if you don't like them and you're not good at them and they don't make you money, it it should should be a no-brainer that it's not something you
Yeah.
continue to do,
Well,
but it doesn't
yeah, no,
always work.
but you're right. But a lot of those things will cost you money, like they'll physically cost you money, but in the end of the day, they really save you money because it frees you up. Like, you know, like one of my things right now, which always puts me in a totally grumpy mood, is when I know I have to package and ship stuff because my work is just, it's fussy to package. I just had a piece that got to a gallery and it was really badly damaged. I don't know what this FedEx did to this thing. They dropped it in a puddle and down a sewer grate or something. I don't know. But so I take the time to do it. I think I've done a good job. I hate doing it. And then it gets there and it's damaged. And I'm like, obviously I need to find a way to delegate that.
Yeah, that's packing is a whole separate category.
Well, I can't even imagine how you have to deal with that. Like so as I was complaining, I'm like, yeah, okay, I've got a flat painting. It's really not as hard as a 10-foot pine cone.
Yeah, but they're not indestructible, and they're issues, but yeah, like right now we've got a 9-foot pine cone that I have to think about. Okay, I can get it on a pallet and then onto a trailer at my end, but now I've got to make sure that at the other end where they're going to get it, that they're going to be ready for this to offload it, and then it's gonna ship sideways, but they're going to want to put it upright, and just going through all the notes with them of, okay, this is how you can do this and not damage the sculpture. Yeah,
Hmm.
those are concerns.
Yeah, for sure. And so I know I see that you work in different types of metal. Like I kind of like the ones that are oxidized or rusty or whatever. So do you leave those outside to do that? And I know some of them are kind of more shiny.
So yeah, some of like I make them, the pine cones, most of the pine cones, out of uh, Corten steel. Corten is a trade name. The generic name is weathering steel, and it's a type of steel that it starts out gray or kind of silvery depending on the light, but it over time develops a rusty oxidized patina that does not or that has great atmospheric corrosion resistance outside. So they start out this kind of gray color, and then when they're outside, they, with moisture, fog, rain, mist, snow, they will turn this beautiful orange color. And they generally, like when they get a pine cone sculpture, it's not going to happen overnight, but if it rains overnight, you're going to see some rust, and within 3 months, it'll start to have a nice finish, and within a year, it will kind of be at the point that it's going to stay at for the rest of its life.
So when you deliver it to the client, then it's gray, and then they get to experience the oxidization, or do you have a forest of pine cones outside your farm that are oxidizing?
Well, yeah, I really encourage people to want to watch that process themselves, because, like, yeah, otherwise you're right. I would have to have a forest of pine cones. It's a fun process to watch. And early on, people were like, "No, I want it to be rusty," and so I sandblasted them and put a hose on them, and they would have a nice rusty finish. And then they started to find out that rusty finish was not stable. It would flake off. So
Really?
I've stopped doing it. And this is the thing. I'm not a metallurgist. But I got now 25 years experience working with steel, but there's just still things that I'm learning along the way. And like early on, I tried to Google how to make things rust, and it was like there's nothing out there. There's lots of things, how to stop things from rust, how to prevent rust, and but how to make things rust was certainly not a thing, whatever, 15, 20 years ago. Now, I'm sure there's stuff out there, but with the stability of this of the Core 10, it doesn't happen overnight. I've researched this a little bit so I can kind of talk about it, but they according to the research, it rusts on a tangential trajectory. So it starts rusting a lot, and the longer it's outside, the less it rusts, and the surface actually creates some sort of membrane that prevents it from rusting further. And it was accidentally discovered. They were trying to find they were making alloys of steel after the First World War for tanks, and they put this, U.S. Steel was the developer, and they had put samples of different alloys at different locations around the world. And then, I don't know, 10, 15, well, actually, probably when Second World War came along, they went back to look at these metals to see what happened. And they're like, oh, well, this steel is not good for what we're looking at. But look at this, it has an, as they describe it, an atmospherically stable finish on the surface. So I know I'm kind of...
That's really cool. So they're not going to totally rust, and you're going to find in 100 years it's going to be completely gone. It's going to be the same as it is now.
As long as it's not in a constant moisture environment. So like in the earth, so I tell people, if you're going to get a pine cone, don't set it on your lawn or in your garden, because it will sink into the ground, and the piece that's in the ground it's going to rust at an uncontrolled rate, because it has constant access to moisture, and it needs to be in a water shedding capacity. So there's these are considerations, and then on top of that, it still will leak off this orange patina onto whatever it sits on. So don't put it on your white.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really, that's cool. Yeah, I'm glad to know that they're not going to then totally disagree or disintegrate, I guess. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
have to say, I do also like the idea of the client being part of that, that change or the way that they experience it, or it kind of makes a deeper relationship um, between the client and the art, which is really neat.
Yeah, and well, and that's the thing. Early on, I would try and explain it to people, but well, a picture is a thousand words. So whenever I send it to a gallery, I definitely make sure they have a good selection of pine cones that are already rusted to a good state. So in that way, I have to plan ahead and make sure I have some pine cones that are at my house for several months to develop a nice patina. Because when it goes to a gallery, people like they make an assumption that what they see is what they're going to get, and it's not going to change. They're not necessarily understanding that this gray or charcoal covered colored pine cone is going to turn bright orange in 12 months. So
Mm-hmm.
I found that I've had to um, help them out with that idea and give them an example.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess because it's, the pieces, especially the big pieces, are fairly expensive, so they want to make sure it's not going to be a surprise they weren't expecting, right? So,
Yes.
I mean, I personally
Yeah.
love the idea that it changes and you get to watch it and see it and become part of it. It's even more of that idea of experiencing and viewing nature closely.
Yeah.
And so, is what led to your? I loved your. I guess you call them the fire cones, like the almost like the braziers that are also pine cones. They're super cool.
Yeah, and that's like a spin-off of the uh pine cones, like a jack pine uh pine cone requires fire to actually open. So I was inspired by that idea. But deep down, I love fire. Thinking about how can I incorporate these? I don't even remember where exactly it started, but the the first major version of that was at Nuit Blanche 2010 at the Campbell House Museum in downtown Toronto, and I was blown away by how excited people were about a fire. And then like several people said like there's no open fires in a city like this, so this is really exciting. And and
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
it was exciting until I don't know, about I think it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I overheard someone saying this fire isn't big enough, we've got to find more wood. And where can we find wood? And they were ready to like go scavenge. And I was like, oh boy, I finding my pile of wood. And they come over and they were like shoving wood in there. I was like, whoa, okay, hold on, mob mentality could really like, it made me realize that building a
Fire's
fire
dangerous.
fire, fire is dangerous, yes. Yeah.
So what's up next for you?
Oh, that's a good question. um, Fountains.
Oh,
I
that'd be fun.
Yeah. So
With fire.
yeah, that's a
Fire and water. That'd be super cool.
yes. That has been on the burner for a time, but um, no, I'm probably like, so I do a windswept maple leaf, and so now I somehow want to make a windswept stainless steel maple leaf that has water coming out of it in an interesting way, something that will, um, yeah, bring. It has to make the sculpture look better and not just, oh, look, there's this trickle of water coming out of it. So
Right.
I'm not
Makes you
sure.
look at the sculpture differently. Yeah.
Yeah, or when it's on, it adds a new component that will make the sculpture better. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll look out for that. That sounds like fun.
Thanks.
So we're almost at the end of our chat today. So thank you so much, and hopefully we had relatively good reception, so people can hear what you said. So I always end up my interviews with, if time and money and everything were no option, what would your big hairy ass goal be?
Yeah, I would think a perpetual motion machine would be on the list, except time and money aren't going to solve that because physics is the problem with that. So if time and money, so those are really like, those are the foundational barriers to like anything and
Everything.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably go back to my original goal of making some sort of monumental sculpture that would change the world, and then like what does it mean to change the world? That's I guess the question. Like what? So I would think like some sort of affordable housing or some sort of maybe like maybe a fountain, a maple leaf fountain that waters a garden underneath it that somehow produces food for huge groups. No, it would be a tree, a light like a huge tree, and the branches of the tree come out, and at the end of the branches, instead of having leaves, it has some sort of like fitting that when water shoots out of it, and there would be a light there too, that when water and light shoot out of it, it creates a leaf, and that leaf is lit up by water, and so you could change the seasons of this tree by how much water goes through, so how large the leaves would be, and then the light changing from like bright green to dark green, and then through all of the fall colors, and then it could be ablaze and or something like that.
Wow, that sounds so cool. I feel like you somehow need to incorporate stained glass in there or something.
Yeah, do you know a good stained glass artist?
No, I mean, I love stained glass. I dabble in it every once in a while, but it's something that I think there's always been, I don't know, to me, there's like the fire, water, glass, light. I think I guess they feel so elemental. They feel like they should go together.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to think about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Okay, well,
check my Instagram next couple months. Maybe I'm onto something. I doubt
okay.
it.
And
We'll see.
Tell everybody your Instagram handle and where you're going next. And you've got an open studio end of September, I think, too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully, we'll be able to be in person at my studio in Beamsville.
Fingers crossed.
It's a Friday. Yeah, it's a Friday Friday night and a Saturday. And we definitely will have a fire there and a fountain of some sort. And you can follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, Floyd Elzinga, or Floyd.Elzinga. I don't know. There's not a lot of us out there. Facebook or my website.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I've really loved chatting with you and learning more about your process. And
awesome.
Yeah, I love your work. So it's always great to talk about the inspiration. I'd love to hear what you're planning on doing for the future. That's super cool.
Thank you, Kate. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Right on, I will. You too. Take care.
Thanks. You too. And so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Coming up, we've got Steve Fretwell. So he actually does abstract paintings inspired by military history, which is super cool. Ramona Nordell, who has a beautiful color palette that's very recognizable. With her portraits are very colorful and whimsical. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of the inspiration behind that. And James Patterson, who does the prayer machines, which are, again, colorful kinetic sculptures. So I hope you can join me Wednesday at 11 o'clock for this. And of course, these will be on YouTube and they're on my podcast. They're starting to get on my podcast, Talking to Artists. Thanks so much and have a fabulous day.